Morning, realizing the presence of God. Realizing it. We all know it's there. We all know He is within each and every one of us. Our own consciousness doesn't come from nowhere. That is God's presence. But to realize it and make it dynamic to our consciousness is another thing. And one reason that man fails to realize the presence of God is that his religion does not meet his practical needs. We repeat in some of our affirmations, I will reason, I will, but guide thou, Father, my reason, will, and activity to do the right thing. How can He guide us to do the right thing unless we know Him, unless we realize His presence? And so religion must be made more practical. And to be made more practical means that it must be taken out of the realm of ideas and placed in the realm of reality, something tangible and something real. We must bring God into our daily living. God must be the most practical necessity in every action. Everything we do must depend upon our realization that God is the doer. If we could but do this, we'd take away lots of our troubles. But we try to interfere and do it ourselves with our ego consciousness, and the mess increases. But if we could somehow know God and let Him handle the situation, things would be much better. He has made universe upon universe. There are so many of them, and they are increasing as far as I can make out. Instead of being 1 billion light years, the distance from certain celestial bodies, it's increased 13 times that. Now, I don't know where it's going to end. But the only safety is in God, isn't it? Because it isn't that way at all. That's just our idea of it. Space is quite different in the presence of God. Space is quite different. So, this reference which I'll give you at this time of our Master points out so nicely. He says, from the science of religion, ordinary conception of God, our ordinary conception is that He is superhuman, infinite, omnipresent, omniscient, and the like. Now these are simply ideas, as you know. These have not much practical value except to stimulate us a little bit. But when we can make Him something tangible and real, something most tangible, something that you cannot get along without in the slightest thing you do or in the greatest endeavor of your life, then religion becomes practical and a pragmatic necessity, and you can realize the presence of God. How can you realize a thing fully unless you live it fully? Any person that takes up a new line of endeavor and he doesn't find out everything that is to be known about that new line of endeavor will not be a success. So, you must know God fully, and that comes through His grace, and if the glance of His grace descends upon you, He can give you everything. You cannot get it yourself at all. He has to do it, and He will do it, because we are His children. We are rays of His great omnipresence, His love, and His great power. He is in each and every one of us. Master said this. I read these because they are to the point in much better words than I can tell you. He says, whatever concept of religion, or whatever concept we will say of God, if it does not influence our daily conduct, if everyday life does not find an inspiration from it, and if it is not found universally necessary, then that conception is useless. Does your religion mean that to you? Does God mean that to you, that you have to take Him with you? It's necessary to take Him with you in everything you do, great or small. If God is not conceived in such a way that we cannot do without Him in the satisfaction of a want, in our dealings with people, in earning money, in reading a book, in passing an examination, in doing the most trifling or the highest duties, then it is plain that we have not felt any connection between God and life. That's why you see religion has failed, because it is not of a practical necessity to us. But when you do reach the point, by meditating regularly and searching out God, that you wake up and immediately become one with Him, and when you go to sleep, you go to sleep with His great presence in your consciousness, and throughout the day you take Him with you in everything you do, then your religion is practical, and it is true religion. Until then it is simply theory. Theory will not satisfy us. And so we must revolve in our minds the importance of the presence of God. We do not realize it, that's all. That's why we do not make it so important to our lives. Our Master has put it this way, and his words are most wonderful. He says, God is the father, mother to all of us, His children. Our troubles arise because we neglect this divine relationship. As God is the essence of our being, we cannot truly express ourselves until we learn to manifest His presence within us. How can we express anything when we can't make a cell of the body? How can we do anything when we have done nothing so far? We have not made this body, this vehicle. Our consciousness is not our own consciousness. Our consciousness is God's consciousness. And yet we think ourselves so big and top lofty. We can do nothing. But when God comes into us, He's the doer, and when you are one with Him, He does the whole thing so easily that it makes you feel ashamed that you didn't think of it before, and you didn't leave it to God, so to speak. These are truths. These are eternal truths. Look around in the world and see all the trouble. Why? Because they're all trying to do it themselves. But God could do it so easily if we would but allow Him to do those things. And so God alone is. The only thing is God alone. And what is God alone? Consciousness, great cosmic consciousness, plus cosmic energy. Everything comes from that one being or consciousness. Master used to say it's like the fire and the burning power. You cannot separate them. But there's a difference there. And so God is that. God alone is. But from that great consciousness of His, and plus the power of that consciousness when it moved, have come all these multitudinous things. So it is up to us to realize God alone. As He has made universe upon universe without end. He surely knows how to run the show, but we must realize that He is the doer, and that it is His consciousness that is our own consciousness. Nothing else. That we do not realize, because we feel afraid. We feel separated from God. We don't know what's going to happen to this or that or other things. Why? We haven't realized, that's all, that God alone is. And His consciousness in you and me, and in the flowers and in all things, is one consciousness. But He has given us the power to be self-conscious and to know that He and I, or you and I, so to speak, are one, O Father. These are important things to realize, and when you do realize them, then religion takes on an entirely different aspect. Our Bible says this very thing about what God is. I'll give you a quotation at this time from Isaiah, the 45th chapter, speaking that God is consciousness plus energy. That's all. But think of what has come out of His consciousness and energy. Think about the worlds upon worlds, and the different intricate rates of vibration producing flowers or planets or automobiles or human beings, all from the one consciousness of God. Think of the intelligence behind it. You won't have any ego if you'll do that. Ego is taken care of. And so, from Isaiah, the 45th chapter, 5th and 6th verse, I am the Lord, and there is none else. There is no God beside me. I girded thee, though thou hast not known me. There is one consciousness, cosmic consciousness alone. And then in the 6th verse, that they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west, that there is none beside me. I am the Lord, and there is none else. There you have an expression that God alone is. His one consciousness is supreme. Thou shalt have no other gods before me is another quotation. And then from Matthew, the 4th chapter, 4th verse. Now this refers to the power of God's consciousness. We read, but he answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Word is vibration. The mouth of God is the medulla center in which all the power of God comes in and has made our bodies and sustains us. The Word of God is the vibration. Consciousness plus its power, its vibration, constitutes God. And that is what God is. But the main thing is that God, of course, is supremely conscious, all-pervading, no end to Him. The moment you contact Him anywhere, you contact His entirety. Think of what God is. The moment you contact the universality of God, you contact its entirety, if you receive the glance of His grace. There's a different conception of what God is perhaps to you, but you can make it your own through meditation. Now, going on just a little bit further, practice the presence of God in your daily life first by meditating deeply and making contact with God. How can you expect to know God if you don't contact Him? Ideas will not satisfy you any longer. That's why you're all here. You're fed up with ideas. You want something real and tangible. Your soul will not be satisfied until it receives that tangibility of God's presence. And so what's to do? Meditate and make the contact with God. Meditation means concentration on God. Self-realization yoga techniques and all yoga will give you the contact to the presence of God. As I spoke of a little early in the service, the great holy vibration, in that is God's consciousness, in that is His love, in that is His light. Many in this room, when they close their eyes, they are seeing more and more the light beginning to spread out before them. Now that's not imagination, that's real astral spiritual light. It's something tangible and real. That's the beginning, or that's the presence of God. Now, that's not all of it. You have to merge in the presence of God as the light, the sound, and the great love. How does that happen? This is the hard thing to do. By fully surrendering to God. When there's any mental reservation, or any little place you're keeping just for your own little self and your ego, you can't get in. Because God is a unity of consciousness, and when there's diversity, you cannot merge in Him. And so realize those two things are necessary, that's all. First, meditate deeply, following yoga, make the contact with God. And when you contact Him, and when you are ready to fully surrender to Him, then His grace will come upon you, and there'll be complete merging. Then you can say, as Lord Shankara said, I am He, blessed Spirit, I am He. Somebody asked the saint, how about God? All he said, all I can say is that God is. He's the only thing. God is. He's the one. The presence of God is all-pervading. All-pervading without end. You cannot exhaust it. In this life you can exhaust many things. If it was utopia, you'd be sick and tired of it after a while. But with God you will not be, because He is bliss. God is bliss. It's not just happiness. Bliss you cannot tire of. And His bliss is all-pervading. And He's watching over you if you'll allow Him to. But we do not allow Him to watch over us. I was thinking when Mr. Kavation was reading about the little story about the boys being taken care of by the presence of God, I was thinking once that we were coming back from the World's Fair with the Master, quite some years ago, forgotten. That's immaterial. The presence of God was with us. That's the important thing. And so there were 10 or 12 women, and he and I, and to get 10 or 12 women settled comfortably at a night in motels all together without fights and fusses and so forth is quite a problem. So we were coming down from San Francisco, and it got late, of course it would, all talking at once and everything, and the time went, and the ladies were saying, "We never get a place to stay, sir. Keep quiet," he said. "We'll get a place." And we drove along a little bit, and way over in the field was a light. And the Master said, "Go over to that light." And one of the drivers said, "Sir, there's nothing over there." "Go over there," he said. And he had the power to make them do it. And so they went over there. And it ended up that the lady got out of her house. This is a fact. Got out of her house, slept in the garage, and gave us, the whole 10, 12 of us, I forget how many, an awful lot of us, we had the whole house to ourselves. And so you see, the presence of God is there. It is demonstrable. And on that particular night, I remember that, of course, there was quite a lot of confusion when we all came out nicely. Nobody wanted to sleep anyway, and we didn't. But Master showed us one thing that night, which was most wonderful. In this big room, there were 2 or 3 of us there, and you could hear the bee sound, the lower center of the spine, all through the room buzzing away. I remember he said that's the only sound can be heard by human ears. That is, by the auditory mechanism of our ear. So everything came out fine. In spite of all the bedlam, so to speak, the presence of God never failed. And to get that one religious experience was worth all the trouble. And to know that God watches over his children is the greatest thing. So, going on now, another important thing in establishing the presence of God is will. Will. First you must meditate. First you must find out the way. And then you must surrender yourself fully to God. It's that lack of surrender that causes us all the trouble. Now it takes will to do that, doesn't it? So will is a very important point. Never mind your failures. They'll be there all the time. But never give up your relationship with God. Never mind how many times you fail. Never give up that relationship with God, because that is true, that is so, that is everlasting, that's eternal. Your own consciousness is God's consciousness. Your own power within you is God's power. Why should you give that up? Never mind the failures. They'll all be washed away when the cosmic dream is broken, and you'll see yourself face to face with the one consciousness God as the sole doer. These are eternal truths. If you meditate, you can make them your own. And so in his presence, all inharmony must vanish. The trouble is the mind says, "Oh, look what you've done. What a mess you've been in this life." God knows what you've done in other lives. And the first thing you're this way. Instead of realizing that that makes no difference, that's the dream of God. And the moment that dream is broken, no inharmony can long remain. Jesus said, "Let him cast the first stone who is without sin." That makes no difference. Don't you dream weird dreams sometimes at night? Aren't you ashamed of them? When you wake up, you say, "Boy, am I glad that's over." Same with this dream here. Same thing exactly. When you wake up in the consciousness of God, the dream passes the same way. And in him, there is no inharmony. Nothing but peace and bliss. We have to work for it, but we can do it without question of a doubt. So realize that you must and will know for a certainty. This is the most wonderful thing. That your consciousness is his consciousness. Or to put it the other way, his consciousness is your own consciousness. Think of that. That's our birthright. And we're fooling around, wasting our time, not realizing what we truly are. Just a word from one of Master's books at this time. I'd like to read for you. God tries us in all ways. I'll say He does. God tries us in all ways. He exposes our weaknesses that we may become aware of them and transmute them into strength. You do good. And you feel fine and somebody persecutes you. And you say, Lord, what's the use of all this business? I do good and I'm persecuted. That's the way of all righteousness. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for such is the kingdom of heaven. We do not see the true end. Otherwise we'd say, we'd welcome the persecution. Let's have it, Lord. The more the better. But these are truths, these are facts. Now, He may send us ordeals that appear insupportable. He may sometimes seem almost to pushing us away. He's so hard to get hold of. I know you all know these things. You meditate and you almost have Him, and then He's gone. It seems as if He's doing that. That's the law, that's all. And so, He may sometimes seem almost to pushing us away. But the clever devotee will say, no, Lord. No. No, that's where the will comes in. I will not give up. No, Lord. I want Thee. Nothing shall deter my search for Thee. My heartfelt prayer is this. Never put me through the test of obliviousness of Thy presence. That's the key. If you never forget God, if you never become oblivious to His presence, how can He forget you? He cannot do it. No more if I keep my attention on you now, keep it there. Can you escape me? How much more so with the Heavenly Father? So that's the greatest prayer, perhaps, is, Father, reveal Thyself. Let not delusion overtake me so that I forget Thee. That's the greatest prayer. Finally, do all to please God. That's the safe way. Do everything to please Him. It doesn't make any difference what it is. If you do not do that, you'll be disappointed in many things you do. But if you do this one thing, do all to please God, then you will find that you are in His presence more time than you realize. Your attention is the main thing. If you keep your attention, the needle of your attention, on the presence of God, will you be away from Him? No, it's impossible. And you'll find you're not away from Him. That was just delusion, just an idea. So let us realize that, do all to please God. How can He escape us? Yes, do good to your enemy to please God, if you want to. That's the way to do it. Otherwise, it's impossible. But you can do good to your enemy to please God, and the results are wonderful. Let us understand this. And one other thing, the great Kabir said, every moment, saint of India, every moment spent with a sadhu or with God is of the greatest value. All other time is wasted. Think of it. All the time you spend in meditation in the presence of God, or mixing with those who feel God flowing through them, that's time not wasted. All other time is thrown away. That's how important it is to know the presence of God. And so, the goal of life is to consciously unite once more our consciousness with the presence of God within us. That's the goal of life. Union with God. It isn't to have all these multitudinous things we find ourselves mixed up in, and all the troubles, and all those things. That's not the goal of life. Those are incidental, I'm sorry to say, but the goal of life is to unite your consciousness with the presence of God, and feel it not only sitting here in this room now, but in everything you do, from the least to the greatest. If you can do that, you have salvation. Salvation means to dynamically know that your consciousness is one with God. And He is always with us. He is always with us. But we do not realize his nearness. As our Master used to say, God is crying for us more than we are crying for him. Think of it. We want him so much at times, he wants us more. These are the words of our Master. So we cannot afford to neglect him. God is the nearest of the near to those who truly want him. But how far he is to those who do not want him. Nearest of the near. And I'll close by reading Master's little poem, which points this out in a wonderful way, called, Hello, Playmate, I Am Here. We're searching for God everywhere. We can't quite grasp him. Suddenly he says, well, here I am right here. In Phoenix one time, Master told me, he had reached a point in promulgating this great work when it seemed to be beyond his control. And he said, Lord, I don't care how much you give me to do. I just want to know that you are with me in everything that I do. And the voice came to him and said, I've always been with you. I've always been with you. Trouble was you were looking for me in the future. God is right here now with us. And so this little poem will show us just how near God is. Alone I roamed the ocean shore and saw the wrestling waves in brawling roar, expressing thine own restless life. Thine angry mood in ripply quiver, the violent vastness made me shiver and turn away from nature's strife. Above I scanned the gaugeless sky, where in its bosom dim I childlike tried on thee to spy, in play with thee. I groped for thee through fold on fold of ignorance old, as time is old. At last my search I stopped in dull despair, my search for thee, O royal sly eluder, everywhere, yet seeming nowhere, lost in unplumbed space, where none may clasp thee, nor behold thy face. And whispers only from the kindly tree, just silence from infinitudes of sky, from valleys low and mountains high, pet child, within the depths of me I hid and sulked, not seeking thee. When lo, unheralded, an unseen hand removed the maddening band that blinded me in darkness old. With joy untold I turned and saw a laughing sea, not one of wrathful roars, a gay, glad world, and open astral doors. With only mists of dreams between, beside me someone stood unseen and whispered to me, sweet and clear, Hello, Playmate, I am here.